and hair is back and everything is back and big smile. So I'm assuming you survived your travel adventures, yes?
Of course, I'm here, but it was um, more than I had anticipated, so to speak.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow,
I
interesting.
mean, because I've traveled,
Yeah.
especially when I had my travel agency, pretty extensively,
Yeah.
internationally and otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I did not expect the hoops that you have to jump through in order
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Well,
return.
it's I imagine it's it's COVID now and all of this.
Mhm.
It's a big change. Was your
Oh, yeah.
travel agency pre 9/11 or post?
Pre.
Yeah, see now 9/11 changed a whole lot of stuff by way of hoops.
Mm, mm,
Made a massive difference. So yeah, now you've got 9/11 and COVID. It's like it's off the charts by way
yeah.
of hoop now.
Yeah. I mean, when I traveled to Mexico and the Caribbean, the only thing you needed at the desk was your driver's license.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah. But those days are long gone. I mean
No.
that that went out the window with 9/11 already.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I expected the passport situation, and I've always, expected the customs situation where they check your luggage. But wow, I mean, everybody wants their own form, sign this, fill out this, fill out this. I think I filled out 10 different forms just to get on the airplane to get home.
Yeah.
Not to mention the
Interesting.
COVID swabbing and that whole ordeal.
Interesting.
Then they had me awake at 5 a.m. for a 7:40 transfer to the airport. Yeah, I really don't, need 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get ready for a flight. You know what I mean? Um, but all in all, um, it was a comfortable flight, and I'm 10 pages from finishing my book.
Ah, very
So
cool. Very cool. You enjoyed
yeah,
your book?
I did enjoy my book. I did. I did.
Good. You am. You
Mhm.
are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, brilliant. Brilliant. Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. Good to hear. Tell me about the book. I'm keen to hear.
Okay, so the book was the journey of three children from the supporters of the Republic in Spain when they went into their civil war in 1934. And because the fascists had far more support from the Europeans and the Russians. I mean, the Germans, the
Ah,
Italians. They pretty much were wiping out the Republic without much ordeal. And
yeah.
anybody that was a supporter was in danger of being executed or captured. So
Yeah.
they sent their children. The country of Mexico, the president opened up Mexico to literally, thousands of
Wow.
children from Spain, um, uh, like a safe harbor for them.
Wow.
Um, and so these parents decided to send their three children, and it was just about, the corruption they faced in Mexico, um, because unscrupulous people got in charge and were stealing all the money and supplies that were meant to take care of the kids, and just the things that they went through, trying to make their own way as a 12-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year or 5-year-old. You know what I mean? Trying to make their own way
Wow.
in a
So they
foreign
had no
country.
no supervision. They were just on their own.
Well, there were supervisors and people in charge at their uh, uh, place of residence, which was an old convent.
Ah.
Um, but those people were not scrupulous people.
In-
So they really, did not support. They used to call them, dirty reds and that kind of
They
thing.
call
And
the children dirty reds.
yeah,
Huh.
Yeah, yeah. And some
Oh,
of the
wow.
children, and then they went to this, they had them in this one monastery. And
Red as in like commies,
what?
like communists, that kind of red.
Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
oh wow. Oh, oh. So
Yeah,
so they their parents were supporters of the socialists or the
yes,
was assume. Okay. Okay.
yes, yes. And uh then yeah, the fascists were bringing in Franco as a dictator and that kind of thing.
Right.
And
Right.
it was just pre-World War II, I think.
Right. Right. That was the big battle at that time. I mean, today we have liberal conservative, but back then it was the fascists who were seen as quite legitimate by many versus the communists.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it
yeah.
was like bad against bad. In today's terms, it's amazing.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
it's very
right.
interesting. But also, much of the supposed communists were mislabeled. Later in over the decades since then, socialism in Europe today is very respected, and it's the leading political ideology that really works and works well. There's not really an opposition to it in a significant way. Yes, there's smaller diehards, and there's in all these countries that are very progressive and sensible. You've got idiot parties and especially they've been subsidized by the Russians, but it's not significant. And the difference between communism and socialism, even back then, wasn't really understood.
Right.
So people tarred it with the same brush, but it's not the same thing, and it never
Yeah.
was really. So
I mean, I had to go into Google at least 3 times because
yeah,
I was not understanding
yeah, yeah.
what exactly, who's fighting who and why.
Yes, that's good. That's good. That's great. That's
It
great.
was
That's good history
really
to be aware of
confusing.
because
I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute.
yeah.
Who's the rebel? Who I don't know. They both seem like rebels to me. You
Yeah,
know
they
what I
were
mean?
kind of because they were sort of going against the monarchy and the democracy and stuff like that, and or just nascent capitalism, which wasn't really a force, but sort of. So they were both quite radical in a way. Socialism back then, they communism was an extreme end of it. So they allied with them because they more or less on the same path. But later on especially if you go back a couple decades now in Europe, to like Scandinavia and that, they completely started disassociating with the communists. They say this has nothing to do with us. This communism is a dead deal; it doesn't work, and what we are proposing has nothing to do with us. So
Right.
but in those days they were still on the same spectrum, just a little bit more extreme. So we don't quite agree, we don't go that far, but it was still on the same spectrum, but they disassociated later. It's very cool. It's very cool stuff to be aware of. So
Hmm.
the key question that I want to ask is, what did you pull out of it as a takeaway that was significant to you by way of pertinence and relevance?
Uh, well, definitely that war is never the answer.
But personally,
Personally,
yeah.
uh, personally, I felt that I, while I read it and I enjoyed the education, I felt some of it was ingenuous.
Very interesting. Very interesting. In what way?
I felt that the author Mario Escobar, um, I could kind of feel his bias.
There you go. Nice, nice. That's really a very, very powerful skill to develop in our reading, because particularly in books, we put ourselves into the author's world, and it's
Yes,
very easy to get consumed in that world. So
right.
the ability to spot a bias, especially if it's not a very powerful bias and it's not very obvious, but that subtle bias, this is very, very powerful, and it's a powerful thing to be able to spot that. So yeah, give yourself some kudos for that. That's huge. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Also, I felt potentially when you mentioned the kids out on their own with corrupt supervision, that this may resonate somewhat with your personal story.
Um, Not really, just because throughout the book, their resounding theme was the deep connection with their mother back in Spain,
Ah, ah,
and her
ah,
deep, deep love for her children.
ah,
I was a little jealous.
I got you. All right. So that's something that did resonate also. Yeah.
It did resonate with me,
Uh,
just
Now,
not in the same context as you might think.
yes, yes, but let me ask you just a little jump here, and actually, my background is related to this. This is where I grew up as a young boy. This was the countryside, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Well, I grew up in a town, but I could behind. We lived right on the edge of the town, where the main road out of town, or one of them, there were a couple of them left. So, it was a gravel road, the street, but the road behind us was tarred road. So not many tarred roads there. But anyway, so if I crossed that, I'd be in countryside like this, right?
Okay.
So yeah, as I'm just saying, that's the area around, and that's for the farmers. All of us is this kind of territory, huge farms of sheep. But anyway, so you get an idea of it, though, right? But the reason why I say it's pertinent to this, I'm making a jump here, is because when you said about the mother, to me, you have a different mother, same as me. I never had a mother that I liked. I had no interest. I don't know. I made every effort to never be in her presence because she was miserable and this wasn't nice. So I never had a mother like that. But the earth is my mother. The
But the
world.
earth, what?
The earth is my mother. The world is my mother. Yeah. It's also my lover. All right. So maybe a little bit kind of there, but still, my point is that, in that connectivity, we when we realize that we have a connectivity that's greater than that, it changes everything.
Mm, okay. Yeah.
Now it's like, well, I'm glad I didn't have that, because an ordinary nice good mother would have been a limitation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
In
I mean,
my case, it
in
would have
this,
been a profound
in their
limitation.
case, in their case, maybe not a limitation because it gave them something to hold on to.
Yeah,
Um,
because the mother wasn't there, so it was
right.
appropriate, right?
Right.
But if she had been there,
If
she
she
could
had been there,
dominate,
yes, they would
influence.
have been sort of cloistered by her.
Exactly, and also shaped by her. Because she's positive and nice, you cannot help but take on her ideology, her beliefs, her limitations, even though they are positive, still limitations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, to have nice and loving parents, if they not really focused in a very open way on promoting and stimulating your openness, you end up being in a bubble that is no less limiting than any other bubble. Just because it's positive and happy, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not limiting, right?
Right.
Every drug addict, while they're in their bubble, thinks they're in Wonderland. It's just fantastic, but it's still a downside. So, when you look at this factor from the mother part, this is a big deal, and to be aware, that you walk a different path. Yeah, that's it. You never were on the usual path, and even if you were and had been, now you're aware that you would not have wanted to be. Yes.
Right. Right. Right.
So when
Right.
we
And I
start to
mean,
look at the
and
world or the universe as our mother, as our lover, this is a big difference. Or father.
I did walk her path. I
Yes,
did walk her path. I did. As much as I fought against it, I
exactly.
was on her path. I was drinking too much. I
Exactly.
was not being appropriate. I was on her path.
Exactly.
Um,
Isn't that fascinating? How even though we don't want to, we repeat. It's
yes,
fascinating. It's fascinating that. But you broke free from it.
I did. I did. I am. I did. I can. I am.
And that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I think the universe does that to say, do you really want this?
Yeah.
Are you really going to break the generational cycle? Are you really so intent on this? Do you mean it that you are going to change your DNA, predilections, tendencies? So it's kind of like a test, it seems to me.
Hmm.
It's very powerful.
Right.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Anyway, so you see, any story, but the point I'm trying to make is that, sometimes with some books, yeah, you enjoy it, but they're like, well, all right, it was fun and nice. But we can always pull more from it. Should we
Yeah.
just make that little bit of effort to extract that more? Yes?
It's funny because I can tell you I saw a definite change in me once again, which is always a moment of joy for me when I see myself different, you know? I can tell you that I used to immerse in the book I read to the point where I was actually depressed when I got to the end of it
Yeah,
because
I
I
know.
escaped into it and
Yeah,
became it.
yeah.
And when it was over, I didn't want it to be over.
Yes, I
This
hear you.
one, this I would have never left 10 pages unread to the end of a book
Gotcha.
prior to me. But now I'm like, okay, I'm interested in the end of the story and I will finish it. Um, but I'm home now and I needed to work on my slides. And
There you go. There you go. Very cool. Very cool.
so
Very
when I
cool.
get around to it tonight, maybe before I go to bed, I'll
Nah,
I'll look at those last 10 pages.
yeah.
I think I pretty much know where we're going with it. So
Nice, nice.
um,
And that's the other part of the reading that changes. As our discernment increases, our anticipation also increases, and we start to look a little bit through and more and past things. That's very cool. Very
yeah,
powerful way to read. Very powerful
yeah,
way to.
yeah. So
I
it was kind of interesting that
Yeah,
I had this, I don't know, I had an audience part, an audience place in this book. I read it as an audience. I didn't read
oh,
it as, you know what I mean, as being
yeah, yeah,
into it.
yeah.
Um, I I questioned it. I had a couple of moments,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly,
um,
exactly.
which I
Yeah,
never did before.
that's
You
very
know,
powerful.
I just became it. You know, if it was a
Yes,
good book, I became
yes,
it. And
yes.
this is, you know, this is a
It's a shift.
award-winning author, and you know,
Yeah.
Mario
So,
Escobar is very
right.
respected in the Spanish literary world.
Right, right. So this absolutely dovetails with my experience. When I was a kid and a young man, I read like crazy. At least one book a day. I remember one year I used to write them down in a list. All the books that I read, and that's why I remember so specifically. And one year I read an average 2 books a day.
Mm,
So I used to read a lot. All my dead time, I would read. I still did stuff. I wasn't only reading, but still anyway. Um, and I'll be very immersed. And this was a little later on in my reading, kind of towards the end of it, because then when we moved here and all that, I didn't get a chance to read so much, and all sorts of stuff happened. So that didn't last forever. But at any rate, so I remember it was a science fiction series, Ender's World. They made the movie of it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, or the book, the whole Ender's World series, or Ender's Game, actually. Not anyway. It's very famous science fiction book. It's a long series. Book 1 and 2 of the series won the Hugo and the Nebula Awards, which are the top awards in science fiction and fantasy. So quite an accomplishment, quite an achievement. And at the time, I read the book and I really enjoyed them a lot, and I even gave it 4 stars, which in my rating that's pretty high. 3 is enjoyable, 4 is memorable, and 5 is for what's changed my life, right? So life changing. So that's quite a big accomplishment. Nowadays everybody just gives 5 stars automatically, like on Goodreads, 4 or 5 stars. It's meaningless. I mean, you're just saying all of these books that you read, they're all the top things in your library. There has to be some range, no? So most books I read are 3 stars because I enjoy most books, even if they're fairly crappy. But anyway, so second to the last one in the series, I just finished reading this morning, and I gave it 2 stars, degraded from 4 stars, because my perception is so different now, and all I could see now really, I was so all I could see now is a demonstration of the superiority paradigm.
Mm,
Now, when I read the books, I was so hungry for more. I pulled out the positive parts out of all the crapola and the negative parts, and negative by implication and by inference, uh, to focus only on the positive parts, ignoring everything else. I had great skill in doing that. And I still have that skill, but I'm not that keen to do it now. To
mm,
willing to read past the nonsense. So I would put up with a lot in order to kind of get those few little grains of positivity. So his main characters are children, like really precocious, genius children, and he's writing about how children can be sensible and even be in charge of things and all of this. I mean, the main theme of the book is that they train these kids very young, and then as they're still young, like at 10 years old or so on, they lead a war against the aliens and stuff like that. So it's very plausible and realistic. And I saw this as a child, how kids could be so much more, and they would be so brilliant. And then I saw how they changed, how they started to conform, and that all went away.
okay.
So that's what the appeal of the series was. But especially in this last book, it's a couple of these kids are on their own in a spaceship, growing up with their father, who was one of the original kids, and but they just end up being bratty and nasty to each other. And I'm saying, they're supposed to be brilliant, and this is what they come up being, bratty and nasty. Sorry, dude, you're too American. Americans take it for granted. Truly, to them, it's the norm that kids are bratty and argue and fight with each other. That was not the norm when I grew up. You know, Sorry, I mean, to argue and fight with your siblings. Yes, it happened, but it was rare, and or at least an exception. For the most part, you were pleasant to everybody else, or you made an effort to be. It was part of your politeness. You had somebody to really kind of push the boundaries to disrupt that. And
It's
certainly, with other children, you know. Uh, you would be polite as a default, to be
right.
nasty and aggressive. That was really an exception. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, there were
It's
bullies
funny
and
you
stuff
should
like that.
mention that because boy, that was another takeaway from this vacation is that parenting
Yeah,
has completely changed
yeah.
um to what I would call a lack of parenting.
It's appalling.
Oh
It's
my
appalling.
God.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
at this resort,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of young children there and they were just acting so poorly. And the
It's not.
parents were
Yeah,
completely unaffected.
yeah. It's not parenting. It's indulgence, and not only is it indulgence, but it's also cowardice. The
Ugh,
parents let the children have their way because they are too afraid of saying or doing anything that may make them look bad.
that's right.
So the children have them completely at the short and curlies. It's
Yes,
just
yes.
fascinating.
The
It's just too
tail is
ridiculous.
wagging the dog, no doubt about it.
It's absolutely a complete uh, uh, um, illustration of superiority paradigm and its downsides of basically people being weak and being too obsessed with their image. They
Yeah,
cannot be the bad guy. It's astonishing. So their kids end up being these horrible little monsters for no good reason. It's
yeah.
astonishing.
And the adults' ability to completely tune it out.
Yeah,
Like we're sitting there like
yeah.
this kid is banging stuff on the table, and the parents are just sitting there like talking and like it's not
It,
happening.
it's avoidance of the awful truth. They cannot afford to pay attention to it, because then they will have to look at the other thing that is this thing staring them in the face, which is they don't want to discipline the kid because they don't want to look bad to the kid. But by not disciplining the kid, they make themselves look bad to everybody else. But if they pretend it doesn't exist, well, then they can have both worlds fit together. Right? It is an astonishing mental sleight of mind.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I mean, Greg and I
Fascinating.
both agreed that when we go next time, as much as we love the resort that we were at, because we've
Yeah.
been there, this is our second visit there. The next time it'll be an adults only
Oh yeah.
resort.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
I won't
was.
deal with other people's children again. I won't.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, so sorry, but hell no.
Yeah.
I'm going on a vacation. I have no interest in kids. That was
Yeah.
the other part in the book, that the these are supposedly, the absolute pinnacle of human genius and intelligence and all this. But they be all and end all is like, the epitome, the pinnacle of your life is to get married and have children.
Right.
That's it. No more. That's it. It's like,
Yeah.
seriously, dude, that's all you can think of. Yes, I'm not saying that it's not something that's powerful and important to people, but there's more to life than that. Sorry.
Yeah.
As you discovering now.
Yeah.
And being somebody who is an intense mother, but
Yeah.
you also know there's more, right?
Yeah.
That's not the end of it.
Yeah. No.
Now,
No.
also, your kids come through you, not from you.
Right.
Right,
Right.
and that's a big deal, and I think that psychology that he is by implication perpetrating is that, they come from you, you passing on your line, you leaving something for the future, and that you inevitably start putting yourself into your kids. Not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your
No.
kids got to live their own lives.
That's right. That's right.
You can give them the tools as best you can, but other
Right.
than that, it's you don't determine their future, and you cannot, because then you'll rob them of their freedom.
Hmm.
So, it's just fascinating to me that, the just because there's some nice premises to a story and some few nice ideas, when you start to look at all of it with, absolute ruthless scrutiny, it's astonishing how these books get traction.
Yeah.
It just fascinates me.
Yeah.
It's really intriguing, really, really powerful. All right, so brings us to the other story, the gift of doubt. Before I say anything, just share where you at. You've gone through the whole thing already, right?
I did, but I didn't work on that this time.
Oh, no, that's no problem. That's no
I
problem.
did read the whole Gift of Doubt, and I know we talked a little bit about it. I have to find what I did with it.
Bina says hello.
Hi, Bina.
Ah,
Um, here it is. I actually went. I did some modules. I did a couple of modules
okay,
last night. Yeah.
okay,
But we can go to the Gift of Doubt. I just don't have a lot of
okay.
notes on it.
So the key point from the gift of doubt. What
Mhm.
would you say is the key point of that whole story?
Let me
Why?
go.
Why is it a session? Why is it there? And what does it resolve, particularly for you?
Um,
Because remember, we came into this because of some questions and unresolved stuff that you had regarding religion.
right, right. Well, the gift that is doubt is that it leads us to make a choice.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
Capital C, choice. It
yes,
doesn't leave us, it forces us.
forces us to make a choice. Yeah. Um, and I believe outside of religion that God wants us to make a choice.
Exactly.
If
Exactly.
if there is a
Exactly.
God, He wants us to make a
Ah,
choice.
exactly. Why only outside of religion? Why not inside religion also?
Because any organized and indoctrined religion does not give you a choice. It tells you who to be, how to be, what to
Right,
do.
but that's the religion's part. But now think of God's genius. So God says, okay, I want my children to choose. I
Right.
want them to really, really choose. Now, if we set up a system that encourages this, they just become obedient through choosing. Maybe they really are choosing. How will we really make sure that their choices are absolutely real and powerful and totally part of that
Belonging to them,
narrative?
their own choice,
Right,
not
exactly.
being told what to choose.
Exactly. The only way we can be sure of this if their choices go against everything. In other words, if they are choices of disobedience or choices of disagreement, of rebellion. In other words, a choice where the person, the individual, has to say, I stand up alone in this whole world. You may be saying this, but sorry, I cannot go along with you. So to go against the prevailing custom, the prevailing tradition, prevailing authority, this is a powerful, powerful proof of your own independence, your own integrity, and that your choice is real.
Okay.
So it is particularly pertinent in religion because this is the hardest thing to stand up and say, you know what, I'm sorry, but I don't agree. Because
I'm not
now
okay.
you are
Yeah.
doing so not as a matter of supposed to, but as a matter of deep, deep thought and conscience. Yes?
Yes. And contemplation. Yeah. Now
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
hear
Exactly.
what you're saying to me.
I agree.
But my thought process is saying, no.
But yet you did it. You do it,
Oh, I did
right?
do it for many, many
Right.
years.
Exactly. So this is your power, right? So the gift of doubt, if you take it to its totality, it starts to, when you look at it from an overview perspective, you say God's any God, doesn't matter what religion. Take any religious scripture, and every single one of them has plenty of flaws in it and contradictions and things that don't add up. In other words, anybody with a bit of discernment and discrimination says, oh, wait a second, right? And it makes you think. And also, when you start to pay attention to how those scriptures are written, they leave pretty much everything to interpretation of some kind, right? Which forces the individual to decide for themselves. You cannot avoid it. So there's a deep genius to the fact that scriptures are flawed. They are intentionally flawed, and therein lies their perfection because they force you to think for yourself.
Wow.
How brilliant is
Okay.
that?
Brilliant. Love it.
Yeah. So when you start to look at the scriptures in this case, like for instance, the verse in John, the one that says you have to believe in Jesus, that's like a classic, a real stick point there that says I have to go against that. Sorry. Furthermore, it's the same thing as the death to the infidels thing in Islam, or whatever, and the caste thing in other. Every religion has its obvious thing, which is a test of your integrity, a test of your discernment, a test of your individuality and your independence.
Mm,
Very cool. It's genius. It's genius.
yeah.
I mean, the last thing that God would ever want is to have you be an obedient robot slave.
Right. Right.
That's the last thing. So if you following the scriptures to the letter, sorry, you failed.
That's right.
Isn't
That's
that
right.
fascinating?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why it's a gift of doubt. It's a gift. It's a gift. Yeah.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
powerful. So, in other words, what I'm saying is there's a grand magnificence, a grand perfection that says, hey, there needs to be imperfection in this stuff that we get pushed towards our way, right?
Okay. Right.
And the imperfections are there for a reason, for a purpose. Isn't that
And
something?
and still I don't know what I choose. I don't
And
know.
that's the other magic of
I'm not willing to make that
uh,
final commitment to that
and
choice.
that really is where we are heading with Way of Impeccability, because that is a very profound sobriety. Because how on earth are we going to choose something and be certain when we know that our awareness is limited, the knowledge, the information I have is limited? Any choice I make in the grand totality has a probability of being not accurate, right? Or not the most ideal choice. So
Right.
I'm pretty much, whatever I choose, I'm always wrong. So therefore, it's setting me up to live with uncertainty and to develop strategies for living with uncertainty. And that is the ultimate that we are looking to do, right? So I want to set my strategies up so that no matter what happens, I'm okay. This is the potency and the genius of a philosophy of appropriateness, because you can never go wrong with appropriateness. Appropriateness is always contextual. If something comes along that changes new information, I adapt and I shift to being appropriate to the new circumstance. That's it. I'm always living where uncertainty is a part of my life. Anytime we refuse to acknowledge uncertainty as part of our existence, we are denying reality, right?
Right.
So, and that's what we see people do all of their philosophies and beliefs and ideologies and everything, their politics, their religion, it's always trying to make things more certain and more definite. And you look at people too, how much they push their issues. They're so keen to be decisive and definitive. Why?
Yeah.
Because they're so
Right.
afraid of uncertainty. They don't have the inner self-confidence to live in a world with uncertainty.
Mm.
This is
Okay.
what we are doing with Wave Impeccability. We are equipping ourselves with this toolbox, this tool belt, these tool-making machinery, right? That we can create tools as needed. So we are able to deal with uncertainty. Whatever happens, I'm going to be able to deal with it. Why? Because not only do I have the tools, but I have the tools to create other tools as needed. And
Okay.
such a powerful tool is appropriateness, awareness, discernment, understanding, right? Freedom,
Right.
flexibility, fluidity, adaptability. All of these are tools. So we don't see uncertainty as a negative. We see it as a moreness,
Okay.
right? I
Right.
mean, when I have moreness ahead of me, I don't know what that moreness entails. I just know it's moreness, but I'm seeing it as a moreness, not as a negative, as a positive, right?
Right. Okay.
So we get really deep into this, and it's very profound. But particularly the gift of doubt, because it's in a religious context, it is saying, take your scriptures, your religion, and understand that the flaws, the contradictions, the doubts, the peculiarities, the oddities, all of that stuff is there by design.
Okay.
It's there on purpose. It's flawed on purpose to force you to think, to force you to decide. I cannot take the scripture as written. It's impossible. Every single person who tries to take it exactly as literal, they come out with something different, right? Because
Right.
it's just impossible. So you're forced to think for yourself, right? And that's the key to it. When you really realize this, it's profound. Now we start to appreciate the grand genius of it all. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
It's fascinating, no?
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, can you imagine if the churches were to actually preach like that sermon that the preacher preaches? Can you imagine hearing that in your church?
Yeah. No.
Well,
No.
but I mean, if you were to, I mean, yes,
If I were to hear it,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it would also, it would be absolutely inspiring,
it would be
you
huge.
know,
Right.
it would
Now
be
imagine,
huge.
right? Imagine if that sermon were to come like in the Catholic Church, right? If it were to come from the Pope, in other words, right? If
Hmm.
the Pope would adopt this underlying logic to say, look, we have to face reality. And a lot of the popes they've had to cancel things from before and said, some of these popes weren't cool, they weren't good, because some of the popes in the past were absolute monsters, right?
Right.
And they had to sort of, it's supposed to be, the Pope's infallibility. And they had to change things that previous popes said, which before was very almost impossible for them because of the doctrine of papal infallibility, right? So they've changed a lot of their policies. So the church has sort of progressed. But if the Catholic Church were to say, look, the genius of God is that there is this overall perfection. And in that, the scriptures are flawed because of God's genius to force us to think and choose for ourselves. Now,
Right.
if this becomes church policy, can you imagine the change? Can you imagine how their religion would suddenly open up and blossom? Not be, you would think, the logic sort of would say, no, but this would chase people away from it. No, it would do the opposite. It would bring people back into the church.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because you can find inspiration, you can have discussion, you can have discernment. The whole point of religion now is to grow yourself morally, intellectually, psychologically, but also in terms of your sobriety and your integrity and your ethics. This is the whole point of the church, no?
Right. Right.
So the more you are open, the more you are being an individual, as long as it's in accordance with your integrity, the closer you are to God, right?
Right. Right.
Isn't that fascinating? So
And
the more
absolutely.
independent you become, the more one with God you become.
Well,
And I'm saying it's transformative, if it were to come, if that were to take hold in the church, it would be
yeah.
something. It would be something. And it
Yeah.
would solve their dilemma because they've never had this logic in their thing. They're always trying to claim that everything is perfect as is, and it doesn't work. And that's why they lose people, because they cannot stand the hypocrisy. This says no more hypocrisy anymore.
Well, I mean, because when you're brought up in the church, there's no encouragement to ever think for yourself, right?
Exactly.
No,
11th
never.
commandment, thou shalt not question.
Yeah. So, and then as you as you grow into adulthood and
Right.
you face adult situation, the church sort of betrays you.
Exactly. Exactly.
I
Because
mean, I
you,
felt so safe when I was
ah,
in mass, and I felt safe and I felt loved. And then all of a sudden I didn't fit into their box anymore, and I
right,
was no
right,
longer loved. I was
right.
chastised. I was made to feel
Exactly.
bad.
Exactly. And you realize, though, the box was one in which you had no independence, no
Yeah.
self thought. And how can you have any self respect if you cannot own your own thoughts?
And
If you cannot
it
be
also
honest?
that box
Yeah.
was teaching me,
Yeah.
who to hate.
Yeah, exactly. So please do me a favor and write a post or an essay on exactly this. This point now of your experience and relationship with the church and religion. You don't have to publish it, just for yourself, because I
Okay.
think it's a very profound perspective and it's a very deep point. How you had that comfort and then you got betrayed, and why exactly. To discern it, to really expose it for what it is, that you started to wake up and think for yourself, but the church did not allow that and didn't want that. And then it labeled that as a negative. So really, but how is this now make any sense whatsoever? That's not very godly. That's all about control and power, right?
Right. Okay.
So and the church doesn't help themselves here. Yes, there are people that need that comfort, but you can still provide that, but also provide them opportunity to start to think for themselves. If you look at those the checkout people, the whatever they call them, I don't know. I don't know. You have them at your supermarket. You said, right?
What is that?
The
I
the
have my
people
what?
that are handicapped or whatever, right? That help in the things, right?
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
right, but look at those, right? In days gone by, like when I grew up, we called them retarded, and that was not a negative thing. It was just okay. That was it. They probably called themselves that too. But those people were absolutely in a box where they were taken care of, and that was it. Everybody just took it for granted, including the people themselves, that your role in life is to be taken care of, until somebody said even those people wanted to have some measure of independence and think for themselves, right? Because all those people, the theme that runs through them is that they are in some way taking initiative and being in charge and have independence, right?
And have value.
Right, and that independence, though, the ability to have value and be acting independently, this is huge for them, right?
Right.
Right. So I'm saying that the church, even saying, "Oh, we're the shepherd, we'll look after you, we'll take care of you," it doesn't work. Nobody wants it really. Temporarily, yes, maybe, but in the longer term, no.
Okay.
So when we look at this gift of doubt, as this is the point to say, hey, the way the system is set up, it actually, if you have integrity and honesty and conscience, you will automatically question. And it's like it's a self-proving test mechanism. If you get caught up in it, well, you didn't have enough integrity to question. You didn't have enough honesty. You didn't have enough self-confidence. You had to learn that and acquire that in order to satisfy your inner conflicts and not to be a hypocrite. If you stay in the church, you're going to be a hypocrite and you're going to be miserable. If stay in terms of, you can stay in the church, but if you buy into all of it, but if you start to question and disagree, you now stand up for yourself and you have integrity, you have conscience. In other words, you become a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
As opposed to being a robot slave sheep. So do you see the gift of it? You see the genius, the absolute overall genius. If you had to design the system, would you not design it similarly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with
I
my
mean, given the
experience.
prevailing, right, given the
Yeah.
prevailing superiority paradigm, that you basically setting the system up that, hey, if you aren't going to do what's right, you are going to suffer and you are going to be a robot slave and you're going to not have independence. Okay, you may choose that, but there's a price you pay for it. Fine, there's effort reward to everything. But if you want to be free, truly free, You have to prove it to be real. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is how you know it's real, because you're going against the system. Very
Mm.
powerful. Very, very, very powerful.
Mm.
Fascinating. So it's interesting with the kids that you see that are growing up now. They don't have the limitations of being told what to do. So they have to figure it out for themselves. And they have a just as an enormous hurdle to overcome. And that hurdle is the hurdle of indulgence and thinking and ego and, believing whatever they think is just the be all and end all of everything.
Yeah.
So, they have no humility, they have no modesty. We grew up with too much humility and modesty, and they
Hmm.
grew up in the reverse. But excess tends to breed excess. It's fascinating.
Right.
So it's
Right.
very interesting. But
Hmm.
this whole point of the gift of doubt, when we start to see that in the grander scheme of things, we need to insist that things do make sense.
Right.
No matter
Right.
what it is, in some way it makes sense. That to me means we truly, truly have complete and utter faith in the genius of the universe. I go
Right.
even beyond God. I think, the universe is like God, and then there's, Krishna and Buddha and Allah and everybody else, and then there's the
Right.
universe.
Right.
So, at least in my mind, because it sort of makes sense, or they're all the same thing with just with different names. So either way you want to look at it, doesn't matter. But to
Yeah.
see the greater genius of it all, I don't care that something is behind it or not. It may be my own subconscious, and I'm materializing all of this, and I'm the genius. I don't know, but either way, there's a grand genius at work. And when I look for how things make sense in, capital M, capital S, in the big picture, I always, always, always find it.
Mm.
It's a transformative way to live.
Hmm. Hmm.
It always makes sense in some way or another. And it's
Okay.
always in the context of awareness and awareness enhancement and development. In other words, personal growth.
Okay.
That's the key. That's always the key, right? I mean, the whole thing with religion doesn't make sense if you don't take personal growth and awareness and enhancement and development of being more aware. In other words, being more of a person, being more independent. In that context, it makes sense. Take that away, then it's meaningless, right?
Right.
So very powerful. So when we understand this, it's very transformative, no?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's huge. I started off on this thing with making sense, because I was on a path to looking for moreness. Specifically in my language, it was perfection, but an attainable perfection, right? A situation or circumstance where even if I had the power to change anything at all, I would not. That to me was what perfection meant. So it's an attainable ideal, right? And so the more I went on this for a long time, and then I said, I kept thinking, like, what would be perfect, what would be ideal, and I kept trying to imagine this. And one day I said, well, let me work it in reverse. Let me assume it's already ideal and see if I can make that work and it makes sense. Let's reverse engineer that. And once I did that, everything fell into place.
Hmm.
So it wasn't about creating a perfect world, or it was about understanding the world is already perfect. I need to be the one to adapt to that.
Mm.
Big change, big shift.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, we live in a perfect school, as it were.
Hmm.
It's not a
Hmm.
perfect place for indulgence and hedonism. It's a perfect place for the enhancement and development of awareness.
Right. Right.
So it's perfect, but it's perfect with a specific focus and point and purpose.
Emphasis.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So, it's very magical when you look at it. And now when you start to read the Bible and you start to look at all this stuff, it's like, holy moly, man, this like, wow, now that I see it with new eyes, like when you read your book, you're going to
Yeah.
see, man, it's like you're being slapped over the head with think for yourself, think for yourself, think for yourself. It's fascinating.
Right. It'll be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I
Yeah.
I just may pick that book up and take another look at it.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me. Really, really powerful. So,
Yeah.
and how you need to pick through it and pull stuff from it, like anything.
Like anything. Yeah. Yeah. Got to have your takeaway.
Exactly. 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 We got to extract the more. Extract.
Extract.
Extract,
Extrapolate.
which means, you put your hand in there and you pull it out, right? Extract it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
You got to root around in there too. It's like laid down there. It's like when you extract a tooth, Extracting takes a bit of doing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. Very powerful stuff, you know. It makes us start to live in a whole new universe, right?
Did I ever ask you this question?
Yes, you did.
If God created the world, who created God?
Yeah, exactly my point, you know. So I think you mentioned this, and I said to you, in my view, things always existed in infinity, right? We know things will exist in infinity going on forever, right? Because you cannot destroy things, they just change shape, right? So existence will always be around going into infinity, into the future. But to me, since they cannot come out of nothing, that means that everything has always existed.
Okay, something had to have an origin.
Right,
Yes?
right. But that's a false premise when you understand infinity existing backward into time.
Froze.
So I'm saying
Come back.
that this belief that things had to have a
You're
start.
frozen.
Oh, okay. I'll wait. I'll wait. There I come back. Right.
Is it
So
me?
my yeah, but if my picture freezes, doesn't mean the audio freezes because they're on two different devices. Is my audio frozen? Oh, you frozen. You frozen, Cheryl. You sitting like this. Yeah. There she is. It was actually you that froze and me.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. And then
So,
it dropped me right out of it and brought me back in.
yeah. Yeah. It
Oh,
does.
that's interesting.
Zoom is very good in that. It tries very hard to, reestablish the connection and not to let it actually die. So
Yeah.
they're very good about that. So I was saying this idea that something had to start somewhere is a false premise. It's a false belief. We assume so, but it's not true. And when we realize why it's not true, because we realize that things had to always have existed backwards in time into infinity. That means there is no start. In the same way as there's no end, there's no start. Things always
Wow.
existed. Yeah.
Because that is the biggest leap of faith.
Yeah. And then you start to get into physics when you say with time. And there's a whole big thing that you can go look up that says time doesn't actually exist. And there's all sorts of Einstein and all these physical
Hmm.
proof for it. Yeah. So, it's just we create this time. Time is really an illusion. So you start to get into that. And now when you start to think it's all happening in the moment, we just stretch it out and we ascribe time to it. So anyway, there's lots that go to it, but forget all that. Just when you start to say, look, there's no end to things. Likewise, there was no beginning. Things have always existed backwards in time. They'll always exist forward in time. It's very
Okay.
simple.
Okay.
Very simple. So, there was nothing before God because God always existed. It's as simple as that. The answer to your question.
Hmm.
There was
Okay.
nothing before God because God existed for infinity. Yeah.
Hmm.
Right?
I
I mean, do you
guess.
think God will end? If God could start, that means God could end.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you see my point then? All right. So then God transforms into something else. Or, something gets supersedes God, or God superseded something else. But there's some continuity, in other words. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly God could be created. I don't see any reason why not. But it doesn't mean that God came out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But, what satisfies this is to understand that in the same way as things will exist in some form or another into infinity, and they'll never end, they'll just transform likewise backwards in time. And that just takes this whole, when did things start? How did they start? It's sort of like it just takes it right out of the picture, makes it meaningless. The answer is they always existed in some form or another. So God, whatever was before, something changed, something started, something created it. In the same way as worlds and suns, they came out of nothing, a rearrangement of elements of some kind, of energies. That's it. So to me, the biggest God of all is God called random.
Well, there's another concept I don't get.
Well, replace any in your scriptures and anytime. Look at the posts in the group. I have to kick them out all the time, the preachy people, right? And some of them write good posts. Willie, somebody, he makes fairly good posts, but he always puts some godness in there. And I'm like always like, "Ah, dang it, Willie, your post was really good, and you kind of ruined it with the whole little God thing, because if you replace the word God with the word random, you get the same results.
Okay. I'll give
mean,
that a shot. I'm going to give it a try.
Well, take your prayers. They get answered by, according to random. You say, well, sometimes they get answered, sometimes they don't. Well, that's random for you. Sometimes you got a string of them happening in your favor, and then a string that don't happen. That's totally random. So it's random gives as much
But
explanation.
see, I thought I always thought that no answer is an answer. Yeah. So if your prayers don't get answered, it's because there's a stronger force there that knows that that's not what you should
again,
have
this
or
is the power of
need, or you know what I mean? Like no answer is an answer.
Yeah, I understand, but we can also put that simply down to the power of rationalization. As human beings, we have an incredible genius for rationalization, but we have to.
Well, I think we have an incredible need. Rationalization
exactly.
equaling, something that puts you at peace, that you understand.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we would be in a state of a chaotic, stressful.
Exactly. Rationalization helps us to take random and give it meaning, because without meaning, we have random. So we don't want random, we want meaning. But we have to be very careful that that genius of rationalization doesn't become a pathology.
Okay.
Right? In other words, where we start like those parents who were ignoring their kids. Right? They have some rationalization for how their kid is just fine and wonderful. When you talk to them, their kid is fantastic. Right? That's the pathology of rationalization. Religion has taken it to the extremes as well. Right? That's for the most part, they are looking to rationalize and make things ordered and also to rationalize power, to rationalize obedience, because it gives me power. I'm the one who's doing this, putting out the religion, pushing it out there. So it's very powerful,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to understand too, yes, it's the word of God, but it's still written by people, by humans, So how much human stuff is in there? Yes, they may be or may not be inspired, but when we understand this whole issue about freedom and choice, you're going to say, well, God is going to make sure that whoever writes it has some freedom and choice in there, because we need to have the freedom and choice to understand it and take it. If God really wrote things in such a way that you knew for a fact it was absolutely from the word of God, like if the word of God spoke in your head and you were, or just, a booming voice across the whole world, you would be forced to obey it because, well, it's God. Where is your freedom now? In an instant, it's gone. So God would never talk to you directly.
Okay.
It cannot, because it would immediately rob you of your freedom.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I have a post somewhere on my blog why God would not and could not talk to us directly.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting when you, again, this is the power of what we do. One of our two most profound tools that are such powerful, they are really tools that create other tools. One, thinking things through to the end, and the other is to shift to multiple perspectives. Right. So the moment we start to do this with religion, like in this thing with God talking to you, think it through to the end. For me, I always say, oh, that sounds great. But then I look at the practicalities and I imagine what would happen if this actually were to take place. Something I learned from Columbo, by the way.
Columbo?
Yeah, the TV show, the
TV show?
Columbo. Yeah. Right, you watched it, right?
Yeah.
So one thing Columbo pretty much always did is he would reenact the way things were supposed to have happened. right? So you look at the scene and you look and you hear the witness and everybody involved, which always in his show included the murderer's version of things, right? And it all makes perfect sense, but he never took their word for it or the other policeman's word. He always actually tested it to see that, well, the theories always were very plausible and made total sense, and everybody there, all the other police just completely bought them. But he went and tested. So, okay, according to the way the thing is, the murderer would have been standing here and he shot them over there. But then when he actually did it, he said, well, no, this couldn't happen because, that open door that we assumed was an open door actually has a spring closure on it, and unless somebody propped it open, it would have closed automatically. So this couldn't have worked as advertised. You see, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So he always went to the practical reenactment to check if it actually could work. And I do the same thing. So when you take the word of God and you do this, like literally if God spoke to us, right? And you go to the actual practical application, what would happen? What would be the consequence? I'm taking it to the end through actually applying it. I said, well, I would have no choice but to obey, which means that I would be a slave. I wouldn't much care for that in my state of mind. Okay, God might be teaching me and saying, do this, do that, but then I will end up being reliant on God because I'm always going to be getting the answers,
Right,
which
right.
doesn't really help me.
And we're
Yes,
not thinking for ourselves any longer.
if God was going to stick around forever, all right, fine. Maybe they would be okay. But there's maybe I don't develop my own ability. I'm just a robot and a slave. So you start to realize this, it changes everything.
Mm.
Furthermore, I bet you anything, if God did make a pronouncement, like literally, let's say that, TV, we have a break in our interruption. I'm assuming you all heard that, and everybody in the world heard this, right? They heard the same thing, right? And of course, they heard the same thing in what language?
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, God spoke to you without words. It came directly into your mind, like maybe with visual images or whatever. Right. But I'll bet you anything that no matter how clear this communication is, everybody's going to have a different opinion on what it was, what it meant. And they will
Mm.
act and behave and react to it differently.
Right, right.
I mean, there'll be some overlap, of course, but still, no matter how clear and simple it is,
So those people who maybe mistake their intuition as, God is telling me to do this or that. God is telling me this, predicting this in the future for me. When it's really our intuition is a result of our
it's our
learning.
interpretation.
Yeah, it's a result of our learning, our past experiences,
Exactly.
thinking things previously, thinking throughs to the end, and then seeing that
Exactly. So
evolve.
I can say with legitimacy, look, I feel I'm getting a message from God, but this is my interpretation of what that message would be. This is as best as I know within my thing. This is what I'm doing. Okay, I can live with that. That's no problem. I have no problem with that, as long as you're aware that you're a factor in this.
Okay.
So I'm interpreting and I'm applying whatever my inspiration is as best I see fit. So
Okay.
fine, that's fair enough, no problem. And God would
Okay.
be happy with that too. Yeah, I'm giving you
Yeah.
a stimulus, and you're gonna go and do what you need to do. But it's still you're doing so according to your conscience, your ethics, your impeccability, your sensibility, your thoroughness, and the limitations of knowledge you do. So you're gonna do your best effort, and that's all. That's the issue here. It's not the end
Yeah.
result. It's you making your best effort.
I feel like I guess I feel like my stumbling point is
Was,
being
was,
almost brainwashed to the point
was,
that
was.
I was brainwashed to the point where if you don't follow this set of rules and believe in this doctrine, you're a non-believer, you're going to hell.
Yes,
You know what
yes,
I mean?
yes.
You
Now see
may
that as a
not
gift from God.
question
Right now.
anything.
Right. So see it, instead of seeing it as a limitation, see it as a gift. Right. All that brainwashing. Because now you can say, Cheryl, I have come to a point in my life where I was able to get through and past brainwashing and limitations and telling me how to be and limitations on my independence of being. I had so much in me. My Moreness triumphed in the end that I could surpass that. So bring it on in the future. I now know I can pretty much withstand anything. What a magical gift of self confidence and self trust.
And still be a believer.
And still be a believer, which is fantastic, which is magical. It's absolutely awesome. How cool is that? You see,
Yeah.
yeah, that's power. That's real power there. You can believe and be independent. Why not?
Okay.
Why not? Especially because when your belief shifts to understanding that
I
what you
mean,
believe
that's
wants
good.
you to be
That's kind of
independent.
huge for me,
Oh, it's very huge. It's
and
very,
extremely transformative.
yeah, yeah. It's massive. It's massive. It's
Mm,
massive. Just because what you believe in wants you to be independent, it doesn't mean that they lose value. No. Now you start to see God as the grand facilitator, the grand assister. Doesn't want to tell you what to do. It wants to give you hints and tips and prompts and suggestions and encouragements and okay, a smack upside the head, but always it's it's giving you choices. All right, if you want to suffer, choose this. If you want to have more, that's it. So it's always the point of God is to get you to choose for yourself. And when you start to choose for yourself, God is very happy.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's not this grand dictator that we've been taught it is. No, it's the very opposite of that.
Okay.
Yeah, God's more like a partner than a dictator. I mean, God would like nothing else for you to be God.
Mm, well, that's an interesting thought.
Wouldn't you want that if you were God?
If I was God, yeah, I suppose I would. I
Unless
guess
you
that
had
would be the ultimate success on my part. If all
exactly,
my children
unless
could also be God.
right,
Yeah.
unless you are a crappy God who is afflicted by the perils of
Oh,
ego and dominance and superiority.
superiority.
So
Yes.
the whole thing that makes me so clearly know that the people who write scripture do not understand God is because they have put worship into that. No self-respecting God would want anybody to worship them. Ugh, sorry.
Okay.
I mean, it just means that you've got an ego. And if you have no ego and you understand this, you say, come on, people, you're debasing yourself. You're making yourself less. You put yourself down. You're limiting yourselves to the moment. And you think that I need this empty stuff, your praise. You're a nothing. What does your praise make any difference to me? Seriously? I mean, the only idiot that could think of this is a complete, absolute BMN, narcissist.
Wow.
Right?
Interesting.
Yeah, when you think things through a little bit, it all changes, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
I've had in my life, I've had some times where I've been like hero worshipped, and other kids or little kids, especially younger, where they just thought I was the be all and end all of anything. Oh my God, it's the most uncomfortable, abhorrent, just terrible thing ever. It's
Yeah.
it's terrible because
Yeah.
they become a tax on you. They become a pull down because there's no independence. They're always doing this stuff to you, and there's no freedom. There's no interaction. You
It's a
have
great
no
deal of pressure
ability.
too, right?
Yeah, right. And you can't really relate to them. It's all
Yeah.
shut off. There's a closeness. They're in their
Yeah.
bubble. There you are. What do I
So
get
if
out
you're
of it?
worshiping me, you're not getting it.
Exactly. And it's terrible for the person being worshipped.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the only ones who might like it are complete utter ales,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
who are so insecure that they need the support. It's terrible.
Trump.
Exactly. They're BMNs. Exactly.
Hmm.
It's terrible. So, when you really start to think about things, it's fascinating how much starts to suddenly make sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's all, that's, it's not that we are made in the image of God. It's the other way around. Right?
Turning everything on its head today, aren't you?
Right.
We are not the, we're not
Yeah.
the, what'd you say? We're not the image of God. It's the other way around.
Right. We've made God in our image, and the ones who did it were these flipping BMNs, the bullshit manipulated narcissists.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
And I
want to be
guess that's
worshipped.
and I
So
guess that's one of the things that always turned me completely off was the
exactly,
visual image of Jesus as this beautiful man with blue eyes and long hair, and he
exactly,
was just somebody you wanted to sleep with, not
exactly,
not worship.
exactly,
You know, I
exactly.
just wanted a date with the
Exactly.
guy.
Exactly. Now, I mean, if you get inside Jesus' psychology, so if you do reread the New Testament at some time, pull out what Jesus says and look at it by way of implication. When we start to do the hearing program, we're going to get into that level of discernment to hear past things, right? But if you start to hear him rather than the people around him, what they are writing and how they're interpreting, and keep in mind, 2/3 of the New Testament is written by a profound be a man, Paul. I mean, the worst of the worst be a man, right? So, but when you start to hear Jesus's personality, I can tell you from at least my read of it, I don't think Jesus would have been very comfortable with worship.
Mm, mm,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. This would have been saying no. He would see it as people debasing themselves unnecessarily. Yeah, I would have made him uncomfortable.
Mm,
When I read the New Testament as I would read any book, and I'm looking at the psychology of the main character here being Jesus. Right? Okay, in the later parts of the New Testament, Paul becomes kind of the main character. He starts to take over a bit from Jesus, right?
mhm.
um, but still, when you read Jesus as a character and you start to look at the depths of this, and you start to look at the bigger you start to see the man come through, and his deep compassion. And this, anybody who has deep compassion for others doesn't want anybody to make themselves into a nothing relative to me. He was always trying to pull people up. Look, all the things with the sinners and the prostitutes and whatever. He was always looking to say, these are human beings. And so likewise, whenever you worship, you make yourself less than. And he was constantly telling you to be him, to be like him. I mean, he said it all the time. We are all sons of God. Yeah. I mean, he used a paternal language because that's the way people spoke, but he didn't mean it only for men, and but he would include women too when he said we're all
Mhm,
sons.
mhm.
He was trying, he said it many times. In other words, you and me aren't any different.
Okay.
Yeah. And Paul came and twisted that, and his disciples, to say he's the Son of God. But he kept on saying we are all sons of God. He says it multiple times, repeatedly.
Yeah.
So yes, he is a son of God, right? And but they said he's the Son of God by implication, only one. But that's
Okay.
not how he said it.
Mhm.
Yeah, they made it into something special where he never, ever said it as being something special, as only him. It was always everybody. So yeah, when you start to really look at Christianity, and it's this is something that I would like to do at some point, to go through the New Testament and also the other books that weren't included, right, and pull out what Jesus says only, and make a collection of Jesus quotes only, right? Just what Jesus says,
And where,
and
when you go into like the King James version of the Bible and
right,
you pull out the quotes from Jesus, is the interpretation translation
exactly.
accurate?
And that's the beauty of when we read stuff, to understand that it is a translation, right? So already we start with gift of doubt, that I cannot take it literally because it's a translation. Furthermore, the New Testament is written in Greek, for Christ's sake, not Aramaic or
Mm,
Hebrew, right?
wow.
Jesus grew up in the temples and he spoke Hebrew, but he also spoke Aramaic because that was the lingua franca of the time, right? And he
Mm,
probably also had some Greek, because the Greeks were there before the Romans, and the Jewish elite all spoke Greek at that time, because it
okay.
was the language of the elite. Even amongst the Romans, Greek was the language of the elite. They all spoke Greek because that was where you studied. You read Homer and Aristotle and Plato and all of the other Archimedes and everybody. So we have to put things in historical context. That's why, the intellectuals at the time, that's why. But the people who wrote the New Testament, they didn't know Jesus directly.
Wow.
So again, looking at interpretation, yeah, not a single one of them lived during the time of Jesus. They come like a generation later. They knew people who knew Jesus. Isn't that fascinating?
I thought it was the apostles.
That's the point, that we have this image of them as being, but they're not. They're not the 12 who followed Jesus. They didn't write it. No, they are. Those are the disciples, not the apostles. There's a difference, right? It's a myth that the churches conveniently allowed to be, because they had similar names. But yeah, I mean, Paul, who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, he didn't know Jesus directly.
Are you kidding me? Why am I just now hearing this?
Yep, because nobody will tell it to you. Right? Go and look it up.
So the apostles and the disciples are two different people.
Yeah, as the way I understand it. But again, there's a lot of fuzziness on there. But like Mark and Luke and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Right.
Those four, they didn't follow Jesus around. Yeah, and then later Paul. Yeah, as I understand it. So lots of confusion here, but nonetheless, they wrote it in Greek. So there's no evidence that Jesus was speaking Greek to anybody in the writings and the stories, right? At least not the common
Wow.
people, right? When he's preaching
Wow.
about the fishes and the loaves on the edge of the lake there, you think he's talking Greek? No, no. Fascinating, isn't it?
Very fascinating.
So, the more you know a little bitty, when we get into things, it starts to make a little bit more sense. Plus, when was the Bible put together?
I don't know.
Council of Nicaea, and this was like hundreds of years after the death of Christ. There were all sorts of scriptures floating around. There was a big competition between which were the real scriptures and which not. So then the church came together and said, hey, we need to formalize this. And they had this big council, and everybody submitted. And then they decided, and they all voted, this would be included, and this would now become the official Bible. So the Bible was constructed and made. It wasn't like in one go handed down. It was put together, and there were many competing things which could have been included, and it's a big source of debate on some of that stuff that should have been included and shouldn't have been included. Big source of contention. Again, when you know a little bit more, it's God telling you, hey, listen, yeah, you've got to choose for yourself.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. But again, I'm not trying to say it to be anti-church. I'm just saying it to be pro-God and pro-awareness and pro-enhancement and development of awareness. That everything makes sense in that context, right? So all of this ambiguity is simply to say to you, hey, you know what? The more you know, the more you've got to at least understand that, hey, you've got to think for yourself. Unless you are reading nobody reads the Bible in the original, because there is no original, at least the New Testament, right? So whenever you say, but this is a translation, so if it's a translation, there's interpretation involved. And you can go look up different interpretations and people there are versions of the Bible where people try to be as literal as possible. And then you see the discrepancies between them. It's fascinating. I read the Bible twice from cover to cover. One was the King James Version and the other was the New Reformed Version, for that exact reason, so I could see the difference.
And are they intensely different?
Not as intense as you would think, especially when you start to develop a bit more of an abstract mind. But the differences sometimes are intense but subtle. Unless you are paying attention, you wouldn't. If you read only one, you wouldn't know there's a difference. But when you see the two, you say, "Oh, this is very subtle." It's that implicational difference, right?
Okay.
Very powerful differences.
Wow. Interesting.
It's very interesting. It's very
Oh, I've
fascinating.
learned a lot today.
There's subtle things though. When you start reading it in the original, for especially the Old Testament, the word maidservant and manservant, which comes in the Ten Commandments, for instance, that's slave.
Right.
Now, okay, the Jews at that time had a little bit more of a sophisticated and liberal uh, um, um, policy when it came to slaves. They did treat them a bit better, and the slaves had rights and so on. They weren't quite the way the Romans used the slaves. I mean, the Romans also had saw your children as being your property.
Mm.
Any Roman citizen could legally kill their children.
Okay.
You were legally allowed to kill your children. And through most of history, almost all cultures enabled the sale of your daughter.
Huh, yeah.
Right? That's it. You could sell your daughter. Your daughter was your property to sell. I mean, even up till relatively modern times, we think this is some barbaric thing. No, it's been part of our. I don't care what culture in this is part of it.
Mhm.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And then, when they got married, the woman became the property of the husband. And that was in law, even in American law, that was it. I mean, do you know when you could go and get a bank account without your husband's counter signature? When that first started?
No.
Fairly recent. It's like after the Second World War.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact date, but yeah, I'm just saying it's in our modern era. I'm thinking more modern, like after the Second World War. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. I think even in the 60s or maybe even in the 70s, sometime then it changed. But still, can you imagine, Cheryl, where you go down to the bank and you want to open an account and they say, no, sorry, you can't. You have to go and get your husband's signature. And if you
Oh
weren't
my
married,
God.
it had to be some father or uncle or somebody.
Oh,
Can
for
you
heaven's
imagine
sake.
this? Can you imagine
Ah!
this? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So my point is, there's a lot of stuff that we sort of don't realize. It's very much glossed over and made to sound very palatable, but yeah, it's all bullshit. In other words, major bullshit.
Wow.
Fascinating, yeah. So
Yes,
when you look
absolutely.
at this now, when you say, right, let's go back in history and say, look, get back to that, be like Columbo. Let's go back to the practicalities of the time. Right?
Okay.
What was the reality of the time? A feudal system for the most part, right? Yeah, people in charge, and then you've got people kind of a bitty in the middle, but your tradesmen and your guild craftsmen. But for the rest, the peasants and the serfs, the majority of people, they are essentially owned by somebody. They aren't slaves, but they still serfs. Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the history of now post Christ, right? I mean, even in Roman times, yes, as a citizen, you were technically free, but you still really were under the dominance of somebody. So how do you get compliance from people who aren't technically slaves, but you want to have them basically behave similar to slaves?
How do you get compliance without them being slaves?
Through religion.
Through religion. Yeah, almost
So,
like threatening religion though.
right,
You have to
exactly.
you have to feel threatened by the whole
Right,
system
right.
in order to
Exactly.
comply.
Exactly. And that threat is, if you don't aren't good, you're going to go to hell.
You gotta go to
All right.
hell.
Right. So this is your first threat. All right.
Even
And
have
also,
pictures of hell. How does
right.
anybody know what hell looks like?
Exactly.
Right?
And also, if you are good, you're going to go to heaven. Right. So this was the concept that Jesus brought in. Right. The reward for suffering is heaven. This is Jesus. It wasn't before Jesus. Right.
Yeah.
So my point is now. All right. So now I say goodness. You either badness, heaven and hell. How does this allow me to manipulate you? Well, being working, being productive, being obedient. This is good.
Yeah.
So automatically, I've now made you into a slave willingly,
Yeah.
because you're being obedient. You're going to work your ass off, and you're not going to
I'm gonna give you
disagree.
my money. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just a most genius manipulation, the manipulation of should, what you should
Hmm.
do, right? And it's
Yeah.
a massively, fantastically controlling mechanism. And do you see those who are benefiting from all of these pious people? Do they subscribe to all of the same things? No. Are they working hard? No. The rules
Mm.
don't apply to them. Magical system, very, very powerful. So when we start to see religion in the context of the feudal system and of control of society, it's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah.
Fascinating, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, now step one, God says too, hey, wait a second, again, you buying into this, and this is a pattern. It's in your DNA to be subservient, and because you've been bred that way, right? I mean, when you have serfs or slaves and you have a rebellious one, what do you do with him? You kill him. That's it. That's it. You remove him from the gene pool. So we've been bred to be subservient and obedient, but
Mm.
yet somehow there's a spark of independence that survived. So when we look at this, when you look at the grand plan, God has said, yes, I'll put you through all these tests to say your independence, your awareness needs to be real.
Okay.
It's no good. It's very, and I've got a profound story about being perfect under perfect conditions. It's about an angel that comes down from heaven. Right? Something
Mm.
happens in heaven. It's a big long story. It's an origin story for the new believer. We'll get into it at some point. But essentially, the angel says, you know what? To be perfect in perfect circumstances, that is no big deal. It is to be able to be perfect in imperfect circumstances. There's the challenge. This is
Mm.
our mortality. And when I shared this story with Bina said something really interesting. She says in Islam, um, humans have a higher status than angels because humans get to choose because of choice.
Mm. Mm.
It elevates them above angels.
Well,
Isn't that
interesting.
interesting? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still hierarchy in Islam and all that, but still, it's very interesting that there's this awareness, that this is it.
Mm.
So, Islam has a lot going for it, which a lot of people don't realize. Why? Because it's an update. Christianity was an update on Judaism,
Okay.
right? And then Islam came along, and Muhammad really made an effort to fix some of the flaws inherent in the whole deal. And one of them is to see God as male. Nowhere in Islam is Allah ever referred to as He. That's people do this in translation, but it's always they say Allah, and Allah is in the Quran. Allah is described as energy, not as a person, which is
Oh,
why
interesting.
yeah, which is why they go crazy when they have drawings of Allah, because you're now drawing it as a personage, which is inaccurate. You can't draw energy. You can't draw the totality of it. So that's why
Mm.
that is such a big deal. All right, people get unnecessarily militant about it, but the underlying is that you're completely, totally getting, and you're propagating a misunderstanding. You're putting your old system on this, but no, the real, the moreness of it is that it's very fascinating. There's a couple of other things. Okay, they still get stuck in a lot of stuff, but still, it's definitely an update on the previous. It's fascinating, and he says so. He says that we are going to take this and go further. We're not canceling the old stuff. We're just looking to add to it, the same way
Okay.
Jesus did. The concept of heaven, by the way, is a very big deal. If you look at I don't know, last half dozen or 10 or so books of the Old Testament, they all are the same thing, right? The books of the prophets, Ezekiel and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Jedediah and all of those guys, right? They all say the same thing. They all say, woe be unto you, you're a stiff-necked people. You're not listening to God. You're doing your own thing. You don't care. You don't believe. And, crap is going to come to you. And well, crap didn't come to them. For all those dire threats from those old prophets, nothing happened. And when you look at it, when you read those books, you kind of, it's sort of an assumption they're all more or less in the same time period, but they spreading out over centuries, long periods of time, right? And the same guy saying the same thing. So there's this long period of time where people are saying, well, you know what, religion, it doesn't bring me anything, because after Job suffered like crazy, and what did he do wrong?
Right. Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing, right? I mean, the only reason he suffered was because Satan said, "Well, I want to test this," and he just basically ran a science experiment on poor old Job. So people are saying, "What's the point of me being good and pious like Job? It doesn't bring me anything." And Job specifically mentioned the bad guys are having it good, and yeah, I'm suffering. And the end of Job, right? The end result that God said when Job asks, "But why?" What is God's reply?
I don't remember. I don't know.
It's really that's why nobody remembers, because it's kind of like such a nothing. God says, "Because I'm God." That's the reply, which is it's a non-reply. It doesn't actually answer the question. It just says, "Because I'm God." That's it in the story. So it's a non-response. So the question of Job, why I lived a perfect life, I was the perfect guy, and I got punished for it, I suffered. So why should I believe? Because I'm God. That's not good enough. So people lost faith, and that's the books after Job are all about people now losing faith, right? There's no point to being pious and suffering and doing all the right stuff. You might as well just be the bad guy or the hedonist or not care, and you get the rewards and everything is good. Until Jesus came along, and Jesus said, there is a reason why you should suffer, because you're going to go to heaven for being good. You're going to get your reward in the next life. Oh, now suddenly it all makes sense, right? Now suddenly Job, it all falls into place. Yes, you're going to be pious. You're going to do the right thing. Why? Because you won't see your rewards in this life. You'll see it in the next life. It answered that profound question.
And those
Of,
who saw rewards in this life won't
yeah.
see them in the afterlife.
Say that again?
And those who received rewards in this life
Won't.
won't.
Exactly. In other words,
The whole eye of the needle thing, right?
Exactly. It made sense of the bad guys getting the benefits seemingly, right? The whole problem with Job. The bad guys are getting the rewards and the good guys suffering, which is most average people see this now. So why should
And
I
I
be?
mean, and there's no proof of that, but it
Right.
just made everybody feel better.
Exactly. At least now it gave you a legitimate reason for being good, right?
Yeah.
At least some reward. So it's so this ideological concept of heaven was massively transformative, massively transformative, changed everything, which is what made the whole Christianity as a ideology, made it actually stick with people. It gave them a reason, a rationale.
Well,
for
which
being
excuse me, which religion is it that believes if they like die for Allah, they go to heaven and they get to screw virgins? Where
that is in Islam in general. Yeah. Yeah. And again,
that's
to
kind of
me,
odd,
that's
right?
right, exactly. Because you're only you get 72 of them, but that's it. You're gonna have sex 72 times for all of eternity, and that's it. After that, they're not virgins anymore.
Who said
Furthermore,
that?
what's that?
Who said that? Where did that lodge? Where did that?
It's in the Quran about these 72 huris that you get when you go to thing. Right. So the Quran is, as much as it updates on some things, it's very paternalistic. What about the woman? What do you get when you go up to heaven when you die?
I don't know. Virginity?
Right. But again, those huris, and they're called huris, which is where the word whore comes from, right? It's Huri with an H, H-O-U-R, at least, how you spell it in English. But that's the pronunciation, which is, the English word whore is derived from that, as far as I understand. Anyway, but the point is, okay, your reward for going to, you get these 72 virgins, which appeals to your numbskull males. But seriously, over eternity, you're going to have sex 72, and after that, they're not virgins. And any, if you speak to guys who had virgins and non-virgins, the thrill of a virgin is more of an idea than a reality. They don't know what the hell's going on. It's like, they're all tender and so on. It's not this ideal that you imagine it to be. It's complete and utter bullshit, in other words. So anybody who thinks things through a little bit, he sees this as, again, gift of doubt. It's not very realistic. Plus, how shitty are you going to be to say that, I'm going to be forcing myself on these women? Where's their trust in
Right?
me?
See,
I
and
mean,
I always thought of
how
the
the hell is this a heavenly situation? That to me is
afterlife as
horrible.
it being completely non-sexual.
Exactly.
Completely non-sexual. That's like it doesn't
You
even
go into
really come into
spiritual joy.
sex. Doesn't come into play. It's not.
Where, to me, ideal of heaven is where I'm in perpetual ecstasy, perpetual rapture, perpetual bliss.
That's right. There's no reason for sex.
Exactly. There's no reason for a body even. I don't want to be crapping for the rest of eternity.
Yeah.
Or sweating or burping or, fuck, man, stuff's a hassle. A temporary thing.
Yeah. All right.
When we think things through, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Plus, if I have any sort of, I don't like killing things. Well, I can't scratch my head because I'm killing shit when I do that.
Mm,
Anytime I eat, no matter how vegan you are, when you harvest your
something
produce,
dies. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and not just plants, but animals die. All the insects and stuff that are living off that. So you can't avoid killing. So again, if I have physicality, I'm part of that system. So I'd rather not be. I want to be where I can feel, but not have to have a body to feel. So that would be my ideal. No?
Yeah. Interesting. It's all
Yeah.
very
When we
interesting.
think things
Very
through,
truly
all the
enlightening session today. Yeah.
So somebody made a joke. Um, trying to remember now. It's like, how many enlightened beings does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't
They
know.
posted it in group,
What?
and they posted this in group.
Oh, and
Yeah, yeah. Well, they didn't say. They just left it up to people to
how?
to to, to give an answer. What did your response be? Yeah,
uh,
how many
yeah,
enlightened beings
right.
needs to change a
Um,
light bulb?
I don't. Well, if I'm enlightened, I don't have an immediate answer to that.
Right.
Um, because I'd have to think it through to the end.
Exactly. 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 But from a joke point of view, how would you make it into a joke?
Funny. Yeah.
See, there's the post. And it's interesting too that they show Father Christmas as this
Oh
enlightened. Right. But
gosh.
again, it's the queuing involved, right?
Yeah. Father
What about the
Christmas.
enlightened being a woman?
Gosh. How many enlightened beings does it take to change a
Yeah.
life?
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
some
God.
some some bright spark said none. They are the light.
They are the light bulb. There's your abstract.
Right, right. I mean, if you're enlightened being, light is coming out of you, right? So what
Right?
the hell do you need a light bulb for? Yeah. My joke on it, but anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true, true.
Yeah, but perspective shifting, it's very cool, right? Perspective
Right,
shifting.
right.
So, this whole thing of religion, the point that I'm really emphasizing, if we look at the theme, everything that I've said so far today falls under one theme and one theme only. That in the absolute maximum, greatest, zoomed out context, everything makes sense in the context of awareness. Right?
Okay.
That's it. So to me, all of what I'm saying, all of religion, when I start to look at it, yes, I say lots of things which somebody would say, wow, you're very anti-religion, you're very critical of religion. But listen past what I'm saying, past this manipulation of it, the usage of it. It's all the greater plan for you to acquire independence of being that's real.
Okay.
Right? So all of the abuses and manipulations are part of the bigger plan for you to stand up for yourself, for you to understand the manipulation, for you
Yeah.
to
It
understand.
certainly, yeah, it triggers you
Right. And
to
right.
to
Exactly.
question and to stand
Right.
up and to, yes,
Right.
yes. And that was all part of the plan, is what
One
you're
of
saying.
the greatest, right. Exactly. One of our greatest triumphs in our path of independence and awareness is the ability to understand the horror of should and supposed to.
Okay.
When we can circumvent those and not automatically default to going with shoulds and supposed tos, boy, suddenly our lives. All right. All right. So all my internet stopped over there. All my internet stopped. The phone, the laptop, the computer, they're all on different connections, but they all dropped. So I
Yeah.
guess they must have rebooted the modem up at the office. Anyway, so
Okay.
I was saying, I'm not anti-religion. I'm pro grand system making sense, right?
Yeah.
Everything that we see as being silly or foolish, especially through discernment, we say, oh, wow, now I get it. Wow, what a manipulation. But in the bigger picture, it makes sense and it's awesome. It's a genius.
Okay.
Everything is here for our benefit. And this I find too incredible. Yeah.
Okay.
So for those who have for those who don't have religious tendencies, just, all right, appreciate it as just the way the world works. And all right, it may just be a perspective, but it's one that works. All right, great, But for those with religious tendencies, I say, oh, ye of little faith, take your faith to the maximum. If you do not believe that things make sense in the big picture, you don't have enough faith.
Okay. Okay.
You've got to see past the flaws to understand the flaws are part of the greater genius.
Okay.
That's the gift of doubt, right? The
Right.
flaws are there to make you think. The flaws are there to give you opportunity to self-prove, to test yourself, to be real, like all of should. All the stuff that gets pushed on you when you have the ability to be aware and discerning enough and to be able to really look at it carefully. Boy, what a power you've gained, yes?
Yes. Yes. Yes, I understand now. Yeah.
How cool is
Interesting.
that, Cheryl? How
It's all
cool is
very
that?
cool. It's all very cool.
Exactly.
Very
So,
exciting.
when people give me a hard time sometimes when I post, not too many, but occasionally, maybe believing I'm anti-religion or whatever. And I say, I'm sorry, but I'm actually the most religious person you will ever, ever, ever meet.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
In the true sense of what it is, I am by far, every single thing I do is in the service of the enhancement and development of awareness, which when you look at the grand system and how it all makes sense, this is clearly the intent
God's
of it all.
desire for you.
Exactly. So,
Yes.
and how can it be anything else? It's just, it all makes sense. And so I am utterly, totally, thoroughly religious. And I'm appreciative of the greatest genius of God. I have no doubts of the great genius of it. I might not call it God, I call it the universe or random, but nonetheless, I'm appreciative of it. It may be my own too, by the way. I'm not definitive as to what it is. It could be my subconscious, and this is just a waking dream. And I'm creating all of this. I'm the genius, could be too. Well, my subconscious is, right? And I make a strong case for this, where the point and purpose of everything is for us to consciously be aware of what we do subconsciously. So the whole point and purpose of life, you could say, is God looking to become deliberately aware of itself or the universe. It's a very profound perspective for me. And I really do see that as something that's very real to me, that, we do so much magic subconsciously, but the more we learn with awareness, discernment, understanding, and all of our tools, the more we learn to do this consciously and deliberately. And that's the purpose to me. Because, subconscious, like instinct, is very limited. And you could get it right mostly, but it can also be profoundly problematic when it's not deliberate.
Okay. Interesting.
It's like, a farmer told me this the one time about some of the deer that they would get stuck on the side of a fence, and the water would be on the other side of the fence, and they would die of thirst. Water's on the other side of the fence, they're on the side of the fence. But then the farmer came along with his jeep or his horse, and he chased them, and they would jump over the fence. Or they wouldn't do it of their own accord. They had to have that threat, that impetus, because their instinct only got them to jump when they were under threat. It wasn't something they did of their own accord.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So instinct has great limitations, in other words, right? And the same thing with grazers. When grazers are ones who eat the stuff on the very bottom, and browsers are, when they eat the leaves of bushes, and then, I don't know what giraffes are called because they eat from the very top. But that's the difference between browsers and grazers. It's just how much they pick their heads up. Yeah.
Okay.
So same thing happened with herds of grazers when the grazing dried up, and they couldn't pick their heads up to eat off the bushes, and they also died of starvation.
Wow.
Because this is their instinct. They couldn't adapt. And this is what makes human beings so prevalent and dominant when it comes to survival, because we have this trait to us that allows us to adapt. Yeah? And you see it with baboons. In South Africa, boy, people when they think of primates, they always think, chimpanzees or gorillas or orangutans, but they forget about the freaking baboons. Just go to South Africa or just Southern Africa and see baboons there. They don't have them in America, thank heavens, because they're actually classified as a pest and you can legally shoot them, right? Because they cause all sorts of havoc. I mean, they're basically people with no morals and no ethics and no laws who just do whatever the hell they want, right? And they're very sneaky and very crafty and they're very adaptive. So they're dreadful. And, talk about the beer man culture. It's horrible to see. I mean, they're just basically horrible people, really, when you look at them. But people, the baboons, But anyway, but when you start to see them and their ability to adapt, you see what makes us where we are. And
I
would
never
say
looked at it that way. And I used to watch a television show. I used to love it, Baboon Island.
Oh,
I used to love that show.
Wow, I've never seen that.
Yeah,
and
it just followed this society of baboons.
And there were those African, the Chakma baboons, they call them.
Yeah.
Okay. So do yourself a favor. You said you wanted to read different books. The author, his name is Eugene Morais, and it's Marais.
AIS. Eugene
Morais, and it's pronounced Morais. Yeah, I know it's
okay.
Marias, but in there. So he wrote 2 really powerful books, and hopefully you'll get them as a tandem. One is called The Soul of the White Ape, or The Soul of the Ape, not the White Ape, sorry. The Soul of the Ape, and the other one is The Soul of the White Ant.
The Soul of the White Ant?
Yes, yeah. He studied termites and he studied these Chakma baboons, and he did all sorts of tests and experiments. This is a guy who was profoundly ahead of his time. Okay. Yeah, and his work got stolen by some guy in Europe, some Belgian guy, and passed off as his, and so he never got the acclaim. But he's when you read this, it's going to be an eye-opener for you. It's really cool stuff. Really, really awesome stuff. And I keep the context in mind that this guy's doing that. I think it was during the 1930s. Now I've got to start saying, I can't say the 20s anymore because we're in the 20s. Right?
Yeah.
I was always amused before the turn of the century. I was looking forward to when the turn of the century came to what people were going to call it. Because the 20s, 30s, but what do you call it? The noughts, the zeros, the teens, and people have there's no consensus on the name. Yeah. I was always yeah. I mean, when people refer to the same period in the 19th century, they always say the early part of the 19th century. That's how they refer to it, the early part.
The early
you got
part.
The 20s and then you got the early part.
Right.
At the beginning of the 20th century. That's how they refer to it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Or the beginning of the 20th century, I should say. So anyway, those are, and they thin books, so they're not a long read. But it's just a profound, difference. Little say, oh wow, and this guy he did some stuff that makes you think. It's very cool. Right? Yeah. So anyway, those baboons, they're really quite something. I knew a guy. Well, I shouldn't say I knew a guy. I met a guy, and kind of got to chat with him some, who hunted the baboons for the experiments. Yeah, dreadful character, terrible guy, but still. Oh, he was an appalling person. He wasn't doing it anymore.
Right. Just to hear you say that, that's like such a not a Sil thing to say. I know, it just makes me laugh.
It really was. But he had an awesome dog.
An awesome dog.
Unbelievable dog. Right. So the way I got to meet him is, at the time, my mother was into making flower arrangements, and she's trying to make some business out of flowers. So she was looking to get a source for making these. She was really good at making flower arrangements. She made this huge, massive flower arrangement. So proteas, they're the national flower in South Africa. I'm assuming you know what a protea looks like, yeah?
No.
Oh, just Google it and you'll see what I
Okay.
mean. Right.
Okay.
They're these really big flowers, but they only grow above a certain elevation. And they
Mm.
typically, like in Arizona, you've got those mountains that have those sort of plateaus on top of them. They would grow up on those plateaus. So we went out to this guy's farm and, with the idea of buying the proteas directly from the source rather than getting it through the wholesalers. So we go to the guy and okay, we want to go and see the proteas. Now, the proteas are up on this elevation. So he said, all right, let's drive up there, and we get into the pickup truck and we go with him. But his dog, which was a border collie, uh, you know, the dog could jump on the back of the truck or not. No, the dog chooses to run up this mountain. And he says, and I asked the guy, I said, oh, is he got a problem with being on the thing? He said, no problem. He just prefers to run up. This dog had total independence of being. So we drive up, and I don't know, it takes us 20 minutes, half an hour, or whatever, to get up there. And then the dog is waiting for us. And then the same thing on the way back down. The dog chose to run down. Really awesome. And again, the dog happened to be associated with the guy, but he was nothing like the guy. He was totally just different. It's fascinating to me. I know maybe it was in that guy's life to show him how to be a better person.
Right.
The dog had way more character. So he's telling us about, because we see the baboons, and then he said, oh, I used to hunt them and capture them. And he told us about all the things he had to do in order to capture them for the experiments. And, and he told us about some of the experiments too. God, that's why I say he's a horrible person, because, to him, they just were nothing, and their suffering meant nothing to him.
Yeah.
It's astonishing.
Yeah.
But also, he was saying
something
about
you'd never want to be party to.
Right. But
right.
in his mind, he saw them as essentially low lives.
Right. They were pests.
They are. Right. And they kind of are, they're very sneaky. They have no concern for your property or whatever. And, they're very quick to adapt. Now, they don't have law and order and all that. So to him, they're just hooligans, criminals. So they're pests. And they actually were classified as pests. But anyway, it was quite fascinating, though, just to see that whole other side of things, It's really intriguing.
Okay.
I have these little experiences in my life, which
you do. You've got wonderful experiences, to be honest with you.
There was always meaningfulness to it. Yeah, it was really something.
Of course.
So lots of them. I've got it all written down, by the way.
Yeah.
Long.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't mean to write it all down. Just one of those things through attunement that came. So I just wanted to wrap up on this gift of doubt. To really, to really.
No, I appreciate it. Today was very enlightening.
I'm emphasizing it over and over and over again. Because it's
I appreciate that, because it's helping me to look at things a little bit differently, and not be so. I guess I could honestly say I've been shut down to it.
Yes.
Just my experience has been negative, and I just don't do negative anymore. So you're out.
Right. And that's the point that I'm really looking to do, is in our openness of to start to look at the world through a different lens and a filter, and to be aware that we have been looking through lenses and filters which limit and restrict. We want to look at it through the lens and the filter of it being in the service of the enhancement and development.
Right. And the possibilities that.
Right. And then it all changes.
It does change. It does. The lens has definitely changed for me today. Not that I think I've arrived somewhere, but I just feel opened up to
liberate.
Yeah, I feel a little more liberated. I do.
Because the moment we start to understand that, hey, things do make sense, right? And I start looking, they become self-proving, and now they make sense. And now we are very liberated, and we start to live in a magical world.
Right.
And we now stop being victims.
Yeah.
So there's consequence to all of this. As time goes by and you start to apply this new filter, it's going to automatically cancel the old filters. And if everything makes sense and it's for my benefit, how can I feel sorry for myself? How can I complain?
Yeah.
See, there's consequences to it.
So Can we, just because I've got to go after the dog
Sure.
next door, but I want to touch on something before I go,
Please,
although
please.
maybe it should wait till Thursday. I don't know.
Well, we can start and then continue on Thursday.
Well, I kind of wanted to discuss the situation at the airport with Greg's meltdown. And kind of because you kept saying to me, like, what's this really meaning? What, where's the moreness to this?
Okay. So I'll go ahead. I mean,
Well,
I see a very clear, very obvious bonus.
Well, okay, so there was a lot of complication to traveling home that Greg, as my travel buddy, never experienced before. I never did either, but we did travel quite a bit to Italy, to the Caribbean. I was at the Caribbean 17 times, to Hawaii, throughout the United States. We never experienced this. And it was very complicated. There was never anybody there to explain to you what to do.
Wow.
There, a lot of it was just, like those scanning squares that you scan and something downloads in your phone.
The QR codes. Wow.
Yes. And they were everywhere. Every time you went into another area to queue something else and get this code and get that code. And Greg was getting very uneasy because he kept saying, how would I get home if anything happened to you? How would I get home?
That's the point of the whole thing. That's exactly what I was going to say. When I said to you there's a moreness, that then I was aware of that exactly. This was all for the benefit of Greg to realize your potency, your power, your moreness, and also how much he is dependent on you. And
it made me kind of sad. I really don't want my husband to be dependent upon me.
No, I understand that, but it's a greatness. There's always more. And the moreness is about appreciation. When he really appreciates this, at some point, his own integrity is going to kick in and say, hey, you know what? I got to pull finger a little bit here. Not only do I need to appreciate Cheryl more, but I got to also,
I need to grow.
To do more on my own. I need to grow. Precisely. Yes. I need to do what Cheryl is doing. Cheryl was in the same way as taking now charge of being independent, of being her own person. She was always that, but now she's really, taking that to maximum.
And I think what precipitated the whole meltdown was that I was in the bathroom. Yeah. Now, I hadn't gone away, but I was only in the bathroom, and this whole thing happened.
He was abandoned.
Yes, he was on his own for 10 minutes.
And that's his
and then this thing happened that he heard our name over the loudspeaker, and he couldn't take care of it.
Right. And the same thing with his father. He depended on the father, and then the father left, and he was abandoned and left on his own, feeling he couldn't deal with it. And he never realized that he can. Yeah. He's stuck in that belief, that perception. So to me, the whole trip, or at least the end part of it, was all about implications, right? It's not directly what was going on, it's all the implications of what go on. When you look at it through the lens of implication, it all makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. The implications that you are in charge, that you are together, that you are sensible, that you aren't just, my nothing wife, who's got a crappy job. And no, you are a powerful, sensible, more person that really shouldn't be in that job, but okay, it's a different story. Furthermore, he can't see I'm the superior man. That bullshit which reared its head a little while back. I remember, I forget the incident, but I remember it coming up, right? That macho stuff came up. And now that's just completely crushed. So, the reality is through. And now there's going to be an appreciation of what you are doing, who you are. And also the reverse, where it's like, hey, you got to pull finger, buddy, Yeah. I'm not always going to be here.
Yeah. And it was, for me, it was a mix of, okay, this needed to happen. This needed to happen. But in a way, it triggered a bit of sadness for me.
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah. That he was so
Lost.
a
Lost.
mess,
Yeah, lost. He's lost.
lost and a mess that, it had to have been a
Exactly.
realization, even though he didn't
Exactly.
verbalize it,
Exactly.
of how vulnerable he is.
Exactly. But so the awful truth came and basically descended like the Holy Grail, right?
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
all about the awful truth in many, many ways. But it came in the most gentle possible way when you
Yeah.
think about it. Right?
Yeah. Right. Because things fell apart just because I went to the bathroom. Like
Right.
imagine if I got
Right.
hit by a truck and I was in a coma for 6 months.
Right.
What would happen
Exactly.
in his world?
Exactly. So I'm saying it came about in the gentlest possible way. So when we look at it in the bigger picture of things making sense, we say, wow, what a gift. What a gift that all that stuff at the airport was, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that
Isn't that
interesting?
something, Cheryl? Isn't that
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, it's very magical. It is. It
Yes.
is. It's a
Like I
validation.
said,
It's a validation
I'm in a different world. When
everything.
I said, why not? This is the point of wave impeccability, is to shift us to living in a different reality, a different world, where everything makes sense, everything is potent, everything is powerful, everything is awesome, and everything is about us learning and growing, and we love it. We love it because it's always magical. That's why I
Yeah.
enjoy our session so much. It's always magical.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. This is
Reminds me.
that's my gift, by the way, for planning the trip.
Oh,
It's hard to
wait
see
a
it.
second. Wait a
It's
second.
it's an Alexandrite.
Wow, I like that color, very subtle and gentle. I
It's
used to sell jewelry, I told you,
it's
right?
one of
Once upon a
those.
time.
It's a mineral, actually. It's just a mineral,
Yes.
and it
Yeah.
actually changes colors under different light.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying that, we did a lot of jewelry, and I've helped people to buy. I never sold jewelry, but I helped lots of people to buy jewelry.
Yeah.
We would match up, say, what are you trying to achieve here? Are you trying to bring out your assertiveness? Are you trying to bring out your femininity, or your, whatever? And we would use jewelry in a very spiritual and sophisticated way to enhance people's moreness, to bring it out. It's a big
Yeah.
deal.
Well, I'm telling you, I chose this because for me, it represents perspective shift because it
Yes, and
changes
also,
color.
right, exactly, and also the subtlety. It's beautiful without being overpowering, and
Yeah.
that's Cheryl. That's
Yeah.
Cheryl. There's power in that. It's a very strong cut, right?
Yeah. Right.
And
It
it's not a
is.
small stone, but it doesn't blow you over. It doesn't
Yeah.
overwhelm
It's
you.
not a
But it,
gemstone. And I like that it's not a gem. It's a
wow,
mineral. It's a
exactly,
mineral. And
exactly.
it's just more organic.
There's more
And
to it. Exactly.
and it appeals to me. Yeah.
Ah, it's very powerful. Very cool. Good
Yeah.
on you, Greg. I don't know. Did
Yeah.
you choose it, or did he
Oh,
choose
I
it, or
chose
I
it.
cover?
No, I chose it. Yeah.
That makes
He's
more
paid
sense.
for it.
Yeah.
But
That's all good. It's all good. It's very cool. Very cool.
okay. And on the words of that, you should have gotten Justin's Venmo today or tomorrow, and then you'll get mine as well. I'm sorry I wasn't
Okay.
able to do anything in August, but you'll have them both
That's
today
all.
and tomorrow.
That's all good. That's all good. I
Yeah. So
have enormous
to that.
trust. Yeah. Yeah. And I love it. I love it. I love that I can trust, and it's all good. So it's all good. I'll let you know when it comes through. I always leave a thank you and all that. So
Okay.
very cool. Very cool. Very cool. I appreciate it. It's just magical. That's the thing. And you celebrating your own magic. This is what I really appreciate. So that ring is Cheryl, not just celebrating her magic, but her potency, her power, her moreness, and the subtlety of it, right?
Right.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
The moreness. It's not
Yeah.
a
I know.
stone.
And I just,
It's a mineral. I love it.
yeah. Yeah. I just fell in love with everything that it
Yeah.
represented for me.
Totally appropriate. Very cool. Very, very, very cool. So going forward with Greg, you like, it's very important to you, your service aspect, right? You're very happy to be behind, like you said, because you don't see it as
Yes.
less than. It's supportive,
No.
it's service, it's more
That's
than,
right.
it's
That's
profound.
right.
But this is something that Greg has to sort of reconcile and
I
make sense.
know. I know.
You like to support you, but actually, doesn't mean that she's less than. She can be
Yeah.
more and still be supportive. This is a profound part of your moreness, your goodness, your service. It's a big part of your beauty and your magic. Yeah. So it makes you
Yeah.
such an incredibly beautiful person. Really cool.
Thank you.
Also, when it comes to, layeredness, we can love people because of their goodness, their niceness, their compassion, not because of their sensibility or their intellectualism or whatever, their experience. None of that. It's something
Right.
that I had a hard time in my life to get some people that in my life to understand. They
Right.
always thought that, I would like some intellectual woman. That's the last thing that I want. I can't stand
Yeah.
fucking intellectuals. They're a pain in the bloody ass.
Right. Right. Right.
I don't even like to be called an intellectual. I'm not an intellectual. I'm a
No.
practical.
No. But
Yeah.
there's depth.
But
And
again,
there's
so
depth
they
that it doesn't
right.
necessarily have to be intellectual. It can
Exactly.
be
I
just
like
a depth of
sweetness.
integrity and
I
goodness.
right. I mean, I have friends who are very simple people. I mean, very, very simple by their own thing, and anybody who meets them will say, well, these are very simple people. And they're really good friends. Why? Because they're sweet and genuine and earnest and sincere. I don't care how much they've read or know or whatever. That's meaningless to me. People think that I subscribe to this because they think it's important. They assume I do. No. In other words, I love people for what they are, for their goodness, their beauty, their sincerity, their sweetness, stuff like that. Not for other bullshit.
Okay.
That's comes and it goes. Yes, if somebody has it,
Yeah.
I enjoy it. But I enjoy somebody. Okay, you've got a skill in, I don't know, making bread or whatever. I don't care. Those sorts of skills. They're not the thing that matters. So it's very important to understand this. Just because we aren't the same as somebody else doesn't mean we can't love.
Right.
Right?
So I
And this is
mean,
to me one
and
of the great lessons of Jesus, right?
when it happened with Greg at the airport, and I said I don't have any answers as to how to ease his situation. He had himself in such a tailspin, and I didn't have the answers. So did I do the right thing by just staying silent and letting it play out?
Yes, because it's not always about what we say, it's about how we are. You were just an example. You were that anchor. So he's like that kid who's having the tantrum and getting all upset, but the mother stays solid and stays calm. There you go. Don't worry, I'm here. And the fact that you are calm, this is what lets them come out of that dizzy. Yeah.
Right.
And that you stay focused,
I kept trying to say to him, honey, we've done everything we can do.
There you go.
We've gone to 3 different gates to be sure that we weren't paged.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the computer on our record that they need us for anything. But I heard it. And I'm not doubting that you heard it. Okay. Maybe we were paged by accident. Maybe we were on a list and the wrong name got read, and nobody wants to really fess up that they paged the wrong people. So who knows? But we've done everything we can do.
It's all sobriety, it's all sensibility. It doesn't necessarily remedy it immediately, but again, by implication, the whole thing, it's all about the implications. So you were, by implication, by saying that, you weren't in the tizzy with him.
Right. No, I wouldn't go there with him. No.
Exactly. And that is
But I didn't see any reason to. Once I did my due diligence, I was fine.
Right. But by implication, he knows that even though I lose it, Cheryl won't. See, all about the implications. What a genius to subtly bring this awareness to Greg. It's very gently done. The awful truth coming to him as gentle as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gentle, even though you were stressing out. You might say, what do you mean gentle? He was all stressed and in a tizzy. It's still gentle, right? Because his pride and his ego and all of that, it made this aware to him in a way that didn't really crimp him and diminish him as a person.
True.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So
okay.
I hope the end result is that both you and he, both of you, are more appreciative of Cheryl.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I know my appreciation for me is,
because I'm keen for you to maintain it so that you can cue it and maintain it in him.
Right.
Because the moment you give up appreciating yourself, you're just going to go back to old habits, right? So you need to be vigilant now, especially, post this incident, to keep that to this new paradigm, that's now in play. You need to sustain it and maintain it and continue it. Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
it's subtle like your ring, but it's also potent like your ring. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool, Cheryl. Very cool.
Very cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, I
Magic.
guess I will see you on Thursday.
Yes, I am very pleased to hear that, and I look forward to it, and to know that, again, I can have some reliance in my life that our magic is going to come twice a week. So
Yes.
Thursdays and Tuesdays are very special days because it's both you and Erica.
Okay. Well, we're back on track.
Yeah, yeah. I get double.
Craziness of summer and the trip and everything is behind me. So
yeah, I'm hoping at some point we'll have some overlap with Kay. And I'm hoping that you can come and just listen. Kay, she's been doing the program, but I don't know, it's probably been like a month or two now. She went back to school. She was a junior school teacher, preschool and lower school, for most of her life. But then, she left, and early retirement. Anyway, she went back, and the changes, So now, how she's coming into it, and she came on the other day, and all she was sharing was an awareness of her change and an appreciation of her changes, of her moreness, and her ability to be the moreness that was always there. And I want to emphasize this, right? You're not acquiring moreness, but you are connecting to an already pre-existing moreness.
okay.
And you could, this is the all that Kay could talk about was this. It's very cool.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're going to continue, but it's
Okay.
very cool. Very cool.
All right.
When you
Very
see it
much.
in that context, it was very cool. It was very awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. All
Okay.
right. Very cool.
All right. So I'll talk to you Thursday, 10 a.m. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. You have some flexibility in your time at the moment, so it's all good. You come.
Yeah, I have
As long as you,
I have the puppy all this week too, so it's helpful.
I got you. I mean, as long as you know the time that Cheryl comes, which is going to be in 40 minutes time. I mean, Erica comes. So anytime before that, it's no problem.
Okay. Very
You
good.
have some freedom there. So.
All right.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Brilliant. I love
Thank
it.
you.
I love it. I'm
All
gonna
right.
eat some homemade bread that I made. I made some bread.
Oh, good for you. Enjoy. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye, Cheryl.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Love it. Just love it. Power.